Story number 1. The Man Under the Lamppost, December 2003. Living in the quiet suburbs of Maplewood, Minnesota, I had grown accustomed to the serene beauty that winter bestowed upon our small town. Snow blanketed the streets, turning our neighborhood into a picturesque winter wonderland. But with the beauty came an unsettling presence that began to haunt my nights. It started subtly at first. Late one evening, as I was locking up my car after a long day at the office, I noticed a figure standing beneath the old lamppost near my house. The man was tall, dressed in a heavy overcoat, his face obscured by the shadows cast by the bright yellow light. He stood completely still, as if frozen in time, watching me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. I dismissed it as a trick of the light or perhaps a neighbor taking a late-night stroll. Maplewood was a tight-knit community, and the chances of someone loitering around my street were slim. Yet, over the next few weeks, the sightings became more frequent. Every winter night, without fail, a man would appear beneath that same lamppost, regardless of how much snow fell. There were no footprints leading to or from him. It was as if he materialized out of thin air, only to vanish when I approached. The more I saw him, the more my unease grew. My nights were restless, plagued by dreams of cold winds and shadowy figures. I began to question my own sanity. Was I imagining things? Had the isolation of winter made me too tired, too stressed to see clearly? I sought solace in the warmth of my home, but even there, the feeling of being watched lingered. One particularly harsh winter night, the snow was falling thick and heavy, blanketing the world in silence. The lamppost cast a solitary pool of light on the sidewalk. And there he stood again, the man who had become a fixture of my nightly routine. This time, however, something was different. There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense of impending doom that I couldn't shake. As I sat by the window, sipping my hot tea, my gaze was drawn to the figure beneath the lamppost. His presence was more pronounced, his posture rigid, almost desperate. I felt an inexplicable urge to confront him, to uncover the mystery that had taken hold of my nights. Gathering every ounce of courage, I decided that tonight, I would no longer be a passive observer. Clad in my warmest coat, I stepped out into the biting cold, the snow crunching beneath my boots. The night was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of the neighborhood hushed under the weight of the snowfall. The lamppost stood tall, its light casting long shadows that danced with the movement of the snowflakes. There he was, the man who had haunted my nights. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drew nearer, the details of his appearance became clearer. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow yet piercing, staring directly at me as if he held a secret that only I could uncover. My breath visible in the frigid air. I felt a mixture of fear and determination. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. He remained silent, his gaze unwavering. I took another step forward, feeling the weight of his stare pressing down on me. The snow around us seemed to hold its breath, the world narrowing to just the two of us beneath the solitary lamppost. "Why are you here?" I pressed, desperation creeping into my voice. Still, he did not respond. His presence was oppressive, as if he carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. I reached out, half expecting him to react, but my hand met only cold air. The space between us felt charged, electric with an unspoken tension. Suddenly, a loud clap of thunder shattered the silence, followed by a brilliant flash of lightning that illuminated the scene in stark contrast. In that brief moment of light, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A flicker of pain etched across his face, eyes filled with sorrow and anguish. Before I could process what I had seen, the moment passed. The darkness reclaimed the night, and when I looked back at him, he was gone, vanished without a trace, as if he had never been there at all. I stood there, heart racing, trying to comprehend the inexplicable disappearance. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world pristine under a fresh layer of snow. I returned to my routine, but the memory of that night lingered, haunting my thoughts. Days turned into weeks, and the sightings of the man ceased as suddenly as they had begun. Maplewood seemed to return to its peaceful state, but the unease remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that something unresolved had taken place. Nights were still restless, plagued by nightmares that left me drenched in sweat, my mind replaying the man's sorrowful gaze. I delved into research, scouring old newspapers and local archives, searching for any clue that could explain his presence. What I discovered was a story that mirrored my own experience. Decades earlier, a man named Thomas Hargrave had lived in Maplewood. He was known to be a quiet, reclusive individual, rarely seen by his neighbors. One winter night, a tragic accident occurred. Thomas, seeking shelter from a fierce storm, ventured out to a nearby lamppost. The details were murky, but it was believed that he perished in the cold, never to be seen again. As I read through the accounts, a sense of connection washed over me. Could Thomas be the man I had been encountering each night? Was his spirit bound to the lamppost, unable to move on from his untimely demise? The thought both frightened and fascinated me, compelling me to seek closure for both of us. Determined to put an end to the haunting, I decided to perform a small ritual, hoping to help Thomas find peace. That night, under the same lamppost, I lit a candle and spoke softly, offering words of comfort and asking for his forgiveness. The cold air seemed to respond, and for a moment, I felt a presence, gentle, yet filled with longing. "Thomas," I whispered, "I know you're here. Let me help you find peace." The wind picked up, swirling the snow around me, creating a mesmerizing dance of white and shadows. Suddenly, a soft glow enveloped the area, and I felt a warmth amidst the cold. The air was thick with emotion, a mixture of sorrow and relief. As the candle flickered, I saw a faint figure materialize before me, Thomas Hargrave. His expression was no longer one of pain but of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. With those final words, he began to fade, his presence becoming one with the night. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and closure. I stood there, watching as the last remnants of his spirit dissolved into the snowy night, leaving behind only the soft glow of the lamppost. In the days that followed, the sightings ceased entirely. Maplewood returned to its peaceful state, and I found solace in knowing that I had helped a restless soul find peace. The experience left an indelible mark on me, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. Years later, as I sit by the fireplace, the memory of that winter night still vivid in my mind. I often reflect on the encounter with Thomas Hargrave. It taught me about empathy, the importance of understanding those who are lost, and the power of compassion to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Maplewood remains a beautiful, quiet town, its winters as serene as ever. Yet, sometimes, when the snow falls thick and the nights grow long, I can't help but glance toward the old lamppost, a silent sentinel that once held the key to a haunting mystery. And though Thomas Hargrave has found his peace, the experience serves as a poignant reminder that every place has its stories, some seen and some hidden, waiting to be discovered by those willing to seek the truth. Story number 2. The Ghost Ship of Lake Superior. December 1927. The biting cold of winter had already wrapped its icy fingers around Lake Superior, turning its vast expanse into a shimmering sea of frozen silence. Growing up in the small town of Duluth, Minnesota, I'd heard countless tales of the lake's haunted past, but nothing intrigued me more than the legend of the ghost ship that supposedly haunted its frozen waters. It was said that on certain moonless nights, a spectral vessel would glide effortlessly across the ice, its hull emanating an eerie blue glow. The most spine-chilling aspect of the legend was the persistent sound of the crew's screams carried by the wind. Despite the ship having sunk decades earlier, skeptics dismissed it as folklore. but as someone who had always been fascinated by the unexplained, I couldn't resist delving deeper into the mystery. The story began years before my birth, in the late 1800s, when the steamship Northern Star was a common sight on Lake Superior. On a particularly harsh winter night in December 1895, the ship encountered an unexpected storm. Fierce winds and towering waves battered the vessel, and despite the crew's best efforts, the Northern Star was torn apart by the relentless tempest. The wreckage sank swiftly, claiming the lives of everyone on board. Since then, there were numerous reports of sightings and strange phenomena linked to the sunken ship. As a child, I would sit by the fireplace, listening to my grandfather recount the stories passed down through generations. His voice would drop to a whisper as he described the ghostly ship and the mournful cries of its crew, painting vivid images that both terrified and fascinated me. I often wondered what secrets lay beneath the frozen surface of Lake Superior, waiting to be uncovered. By the time I reached adulthood, my curiosity had only intensified. Armed with a passion for the supernatural and a determination to uncover the truth, I decided to conduct my own investigation into the legend of the ghost ship. The winter of 1927 was particularly unforgiving, with temperatures plummeting to record lows and the lake frozen solid. It seemed like the perfect time to explore the frozen waters and perhaps catch a glimpse of the elusive vessel. I spent weeks preparing for the expedition, gathering equipment and seeking out local experts who might offer insights. Most dismissed my quest as folly, but a few elderly fishermen shared their own experiences and warned me of the dangers that lay ahead. Undeterred, I set out with a small group of trusted friends, determined to brave the elements and uncover the truth behind the ghost ship. Our journey began in early December. As the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, we traveled by sled, the only means of navigating the treacherous terrain, and set up camp near a secluded section of the lake known for its eerie stillness. The nights were long and dark, with the moon obscured by heavy clouds, casting an oppressive shadow over the frozen landscape. On the fourth night, as we huddled around our meager campfire, the temperature dropped sharply, and a heavy silence enveloped the area. The wind picked up, howling through the trees and sending a chill down my spine. It was then that I saw it, a faint, bluish light shimmering in the distance across the lake. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or perhaps a reflection from the moon, but as I stared, the light began to take shape, forming the outline of a ship. My heart raced as the spectral vessel moved gracefully across the ice, its sails tattered and billowing despite the absence of wind. The Northern Star was unmistakable, its once majestic structure now a ghostly apparition. As we watched in awe and terror, the haunting sound of muffled screams carried through the air, sending shivers down our spines. It was as if the very souls of the lost crew were reaching out from the depths, yearning for release. Determined to get a closer look, we decided to follow the ghost ship, hoping to uncover its secrets. Bundling up in layers of warm clothing, we set out onto the ice, the biting cold numbing our fingers and faces. The lake was a vast, frozen expanse, and navigating its surface was no small feat. Every step was a calculated risk, the ice groaning ominously beneath our weight. As we trudged through the snow, the blue light remained in sight, its presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. Hours passed, and the darkness seemed to close in around us, the only sound our labored breathing and the crunch of snow underfoot. Just as exhaustion began to set in, the ghost ship reappeared, now hovering directly above us. Its decks were eerily silent, the ghostly crew standing motionless as if waiting for something. Summoning every ounce of courage, I approached the vessel, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. The air grew colder with each step, and the screams intensified, now more distinct and sorrowful. As I reached the edge of the ice, a sudden gust of wind swept me off my feet, sending me sprawling across the frozen surface. Dazed and disoriented, I struggled to my feet, only to find the ghost ship vanishing before my eyes, the blue light fading into the darkness. Shaken but resolute, I returned to camp to share my experience with the others. We spent the remainder of the night in restless silence, each of us grappling with the reality of what we had witnessed. The following morning, we decided to cut our expedition short. The memory of the ghost ship etched into our minds. Back in Duluth, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Northern Star still lingered on the lake, its restless spirit forever bound to the frozen waters. Determined to preserve the memory of that night, I began documenting our experiences, hoping that one day, the truth behind the ghost ship would be fully uncovered. Years have passed since that fateful December, but the legend of the ghost ship remains a haunting reminder of Lake Superior's mysterious past, whether a figment of our imagination or a genuine supernatural phenomenon. The memory of the Northern Star continues to captivate and terrify those who dare to explore the frozen depths. Sometimes, on particularly cold nights, I find myself gazing out over the lake, searching for that elusive blue light, and though the screams are long gone, the sense of sorrow and loss lingers, a testament to the souls lost on those treacherous waters. The ghost ship of Lake Superior stands as a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left undisturbed, their secrets forever hidden beneath the icy veil of the lake. Story number 3. The Haunted Tent in Canada, December 1999. I still remember that bitterly cold night as if it were yesterday. Despite the years that have passed, my friends and I, Mark, Jenna, Lucas, and I, decided to embark on a winter camping trip deep into the wilderness of northern Canada. It was the kind of adventure that promises both camaraderie and the raw, untamed beauty of nature. We were seasoned campers, or so we thought, with backpacks loaded with gear, warm clothing, and an unspoken confidence that we could handle whatever the wild threw our way. We chose a remote area near a vast, frozen lake, surrounded by dense forests where the trees stood like silent sentinels against the endless night. The site was perfect, flat ground, sheltered from the fiercest winds, and with a clear view of the star-studded sky. As we set up our tent, the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the snow in hues of pink and orange before plunging us into darkness. The first night was idyllic. We huddled around a roaring campfire, sharing stories and laughing as the flames flickered and cast dancing shadows on our faces. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the sound of cracking wood. It was comforting to be so far from civilization, to disconnect from the hustle and bustle of everyday life and reconnect with nature and each other. But as night deepened, an uneasy feeling began to settle over me. There was something about the way the wind whispered through the trees, how the darkness seemed to press in closer. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the isolation and the howling wind. After all, we were in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the frozen landscape around us. Around midnight, when the world was cloaked in silence, broken only by the occasional howl of a distant wolf, I was jolted awake by a soft, rhythmic tapping against the tent walls. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the sound was too deliberate, too consistent. My heart pounded as I strained to listen, the tent fabric fluttering slightly with each tap. I nudged Mark awake, whispering my concerns. He groggily joined me, and together we tried to rationalize the noise. Maybe it was an animal seeking shelter, or perhaps a branch scraping against the tent. Still, the sound persisted, growing slightly louder, more insistent. Unable to sleep, I decided to investigate. Quietly, I unzipped a small section of the tent and peeked out into the inky darkness. The snow was pristine, untouched except for the faint footprints leading away from our site and disappearing into the forest. No sign of any creature, no rustling, no movement, just an expanse of white under the cold gaze of the moon. I stepped outside, the biting cold instantly engulfing me. My breaths came out in visible puffs as I scanned the surroundings, the silence pressing in on me. I called out softly, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But there was no response, only the whisper of the wind through the trees. returning to my sleeping bag. I tried to dismiss the unease gnawing at me. Perhaps it was my imagination, fueled by the isolation and the eerie stillness of the night. But as I lay back down, the tapping resumed, louder this time, echoing around the tent like ghostly fingers drumming a relentless rhythm. Terrified, I reached for my flashlight and cautiously opened the tent flap. The beam pierced the darkness, sweeping across the snow-covered ground. There was nothing, no animal, no person, nothing that could explain the sound. I closed the flap, my mind racing with possibilities, trying to make sense of the inexplicable. Morning brought a harsh light, revealing a landscape transformed by the night's events. The sun glinted off the snow, but our campsite held secrets that the daylight couldn't unveil. As we began to unpack, Jenna let out a gasp, pointing to the fabric of the tent. There, stark against the white snow, were handprints large, smeared with fresh blood. We all stared in disbelief. Blood? But none of us had been injured. No cuts, no scrapes, no signs of a struggle. The blood was vivid, almost too real, and it stood in sharp contrast to the untouched snow around us. We examined the prints closely, 5 sets, matching the number of us. Yet there was no logical explanation for their existence. Questions swirled in our minds. Had someone else been here with us? Or was it something far more sinister? The local legends spoke of restless spirits and ancient curses, tales we had dismissed as mere folklore. But now, faced with the undeniable evidence, skepticism gave way to fear. Deciding it was best to leave immediately, we hastily packed our gear, the discovery casting a shadow over our camaraderie. The trek back was tense, each of us lost in our own thoughts, eyes darting nervously at every rustle and shadow. The forest seemed alive, watching us with unseen eyes, the night's terrors lingering in our minds. As we reached the edge of the wilderness, the true extent of our ordeal began to sink in. We had no idea what had happened that night, no explanation for the bloodstained tent. The footprints, too, vanished without a trace, as if swallowed by the forest itself. We drove away, the memory of that night etched into our souls, a haunting reminder of the unknown forces that lurk in the shadows. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the memory remains vivid. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I hear the faint echo of footsteps, the soft tapping against the walls of my own home. I tell myself it's just my imagination, the remnants of a night I'd rather forget. But deep down, I know the truth. There are places where the veil between the living and the dead is thin, where the past reaches out to the present in ways we can't comprehend. The haunted tent in Canada serves as a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, that the wilderness holds secrets that man was never meant to uncover. And sometimes, the things we can't see or explain are the ones that leave the deepest scars, lingering in our minds like shadows that refuse to fade. To this day, I hesitate to venture too far into the wilderness, especially as winter approaches. The memory of those blood-stained handprints serves as a constant warning, a testament to the night when the line between reality and the supernatural blurred, leaving us to question what truly lies in the darkness. If you ever find yourself camping in the remote stretches of northern Canada, remember our story, respect the land, heed the warnings of those who know its history, and always be aware of the shadows that move just beyond the reach of your light. For in the wild, untouched by time and civilization, the past is never truly gone. It lingers, waiting for the unwary to stumble upon its secrets. And so, as I sit by my own fireplace, the warmth of the flames a stark contrast to that freezing night, I can't help but wonder what other tales of the wilderness remain untold. The haunted tent was just one chapter in the endless book of the unknown, a story that serves as a reminder of our place in the vast, mysterious world we inhabit. Story number 4. Crimson Shadows over Siberia. I've always found solace in the quietude of remote places, where the world feels untouched and the chaos of modern life fades into a distant memory. So, when I accepted the job offer to oversee the winter operations of a small research station in a secluded Siberian village. I thought it would be the perfect escape. Little did I know, the isolation and biting cold would lead me into a nightmare that defied all logic and reason. The village of Novaya Zemlya was nestled between vast, snow-covered plains and dense forests that seemed to stretch into infinity. The locals were a hardy bunch, their lives intertwined with the unforgiving Siberian winters. They spoke little of the outside world, their conversations often punctuated by tales of the supernatural that were dismissed by outsiders as mere folklore. I arrived in late November, just as the first whispers of winter began to settle over the landscape. The research station was a modest structure, equipped with the essentials for survival in the harshest conditions. My colleagues were a small team of scientists, each with their own reasons for braving the extreme cold. We quickly settled into a routine, our days filled with data collection, equipment maintenance, and the occasional excursion into the wilderness for supplies. As December approached, the weather took a turn for the worse. Blizzards became more frequent, and temperatures plummeted to bone-chilling lows. The village was enveloped in a relentless storm, the wind howling like the cries of lost souls. It was during one particularly brutal night that I first saw her, a figure that would haunt my every waking moment. I was sitting in the common area, poring over maps and reports, when the lights flickered and dimmed, the power struggling against the fury of the storm outside. The room was bathed in an eerie, intermittent glow as the generator kicked in and out. I glanced out the window, the snow swirling in chaotic patterns, obscuring any clear view of the surrounding fields. That's when I saw her. A woman in a flowing red dress stood alone in the middle of the snow-covered plain, her silhouette stark against the swirling white backdrop. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or perhaps someone seeking shelter from the storm. But as I watched, she began to move, her steps graceful yet deliberate, leaving behind a trail of footprints that seemed impossibly large in the deep snow. Intrigued and unsettled, I called over Mark, one of the senior scientists, hoping to get a second opinion. He peered out the window, his brow furrowing as he took in the sight. "Do you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's strange. I don't recognize anyone around here who'd be out in this weather." We watched in silence as the woman continued her solitary walk, her red dress a stark contrast against the monochrome landscape. There was something otherworldly about her presence, an unsettling aura that sent a chill down my spine despite the frigid air outside. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow. We went out to investigate, bundled in layers of thermal clothing, our breaths visible in the crisp morning air. The footprints led into the forest, their size and depth indicating a creature far larger than any human. As we followed the trail, the sense of unease grew, the forest feeling more oppressive with each step. Hours passed without any sign of the woman. Just as we were about to give up, we stumbled upon her. The woman stood at the edge of a frozen pond, gazing into the still waters as if searching for something long lost. Her eyes met mine, and in that instant, a wave of dread washed over me. It was said that anyone who looked into her eyes would invite misfortune, a curse that had plagued the village for generations. Mark stepped forward cautiously, trying to communicate. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" She didn't respond, her gaze never wavering. Instead, she turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the forest as swiftly as she had appeared. I felt an inexplicable urge to follow, but something deep within me resisted, warning me of the impending doom that seemed to linger in her wake. That night, the phenomena intensified. The woman reappeared multiple times, each sighting accompanied by strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, whispers echoing through the halls, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. The atmosphere in the research station became thick with tension. Our camaraderie strained under the weight of the supernatural events. One evening, as the temperature dropped to a staggering -35 degrees Celsius. The woman appeared at my window again. This time, her eyes met mine directly, and I felt a shiver of terror ripple through me. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows lengthening unnaturally as she stood there, her presence both mesmerizing and horrifying. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to communicate something, a message hidden beneath layers of sorrow and despair. Desperate for answers, I delved into the village's history, uncovering tales of a tragic past that spoke of a woman who had lost her family to the unforgiving winter. According to legend, she wandered the plains in search of her loved ones, her spirit forever bound to the snow-covered landscape. As I pieced together the fragments of her story, the supernatural activity reached its peak. The whispers became louder, the shadows darker, and the woman's appearances more frequent and intense. The research team was on edge, tensions running high as we struggled to maintain our sanity amidst the relentless torment. One night, consumed by fear and desperation, I confronted the woman directly, armed with nothing but my resolve. I stepped outside into the biting cold, the snow swirling around me like a living entity. She awaited me at the edge of the forest, her red dress a beacon of both beauty and tragedy. "Please," pleaded, my voice cracking, "what do you want from us?" Her eyes bore into mine, the depth of her sorrow almost palpable. In that moment, I understood the curse wasn't just a tale to scare off outsiders, but a plea for help, a desperate cry for redemption. The spirits of the past were trapped in an endless cycle of pain, yearning for release from their eternal winter. Driven by compassion, I vowed to break the curse that had haunted the village for so long. I enlisted the help of the local elders, performing rituals and offering prayers to honor her memory and release her spirit from its torment. The process was grueling. Each step met with resistance from the malevolent forces that sought to keep her bound to the earth. As the final rites were performed, the air grew still, the oppressive weight lifting as if a heavy burden had been removed. The woman appeared one last time, her form shimmering with a newfound peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've set us free." With those final words, she faded into the night, her presence dissipating like the snowflakes that now fell gently from the sky. The supernatural occurrences ceased, the research station returning to a semblance of normalcy. The village breathed a collective sigh of relief, the curse lifted and the spirits at peace. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the memory of the woman in the red dress remains etched in my mind. Novaya Zemlya is no longer a place of fear, but a testament to the enduring power of compassion and understanding in the face of the unknown. The legends that once haunted the village now serve as reminders of the delicate balance between the living and the dead, and the lengths we must go to honor those who have been lost to the unforgiving embrace of winter. Sometimes, during the coldest nights, I find myself staring out into the snow-covered plains, wondering if her spirit is still watching over us, ensuring that the lessons of the past are never forgotten. And I'm reminded that some mysteries are not meant to be feared, but embraced with empathy and respect. For in doing so, we can bridge the gap between worlds and bring peace to those who dwell in the shadows of our reality. Story number 5. Silent Highway. I've always been drawn to the open road, the endless stretches of pavement that promise freedom and adventure. Driving through Alaska in the dead of winter was something I dreamed about for years, a chance to experience the raw, untamed beauty of the last frontier. But what I encountered that night on the lonely Highway 2 would forever change my perception of solitude and the unseen forces that linger in the shadows. It was December 2011, and the biting cold had transformed the landscape into a frozen wonderland. Snowflakes danced in the headlights as I navigated the winding highway, the silence of the vast wilderness enveloping me. My destination was clear, a remote cabin where I planned to spend the winter writing my first novel. The journey had been uneventful until a sudden blizzard began to roll in, reducing visibility to mere feet and turning the highway into a treacherous path. I pulled over at the first available rest stop, the overhead lights flickering ominously in the storm. The sign read Dead Man's Curve in faded letters, a name that sent a shiver down my spine. Ignoring the unease creeping up my neck, I decided to stay the night, hoping the storm would pass by morning. I parked my truck, grabbed my sleeping bag, and trudged towards the small, abandoned building that served as the rest area. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the wind howling through the cracks in the walls. Inside, the space was dimly lit by a single, flickering bulb. Dust particles floated in the air, and the scent of mildew permeated the room. I set up my sleeping bag in the corner, the cold seeping through the thin fabric of my jacket. As I settled in, the storm intensified, the wind battering the building with relentless fury. Hours passed in restless sleep, punctuated by the eerie sounds of the storm outside. Suddenly, a loud bang jolted me awake, followed by a series of rapid, rhythmic knocks at the door. My heart raced as I listened, the sound growing louder and more insistent. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously approached the door, my mind racing with thoughts of stranded travelers or perhaps something more sinister. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. The knocking ceased abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press down on me. I hesitated, unsure whether to open the door or retreat to the safety of my sleeping bag. Gathering my courage, I peeked through the small window, only to find nothing but swirling snow and darkness. Relieved yet still on edge, I turned to go back, but another knock echoed through the room, this time, softer and more deliberate. My pulse quickened as I approached the door once more. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. Still, no answer came, only the sound of my own breathing filling the space. Suddenly, the door swung open with a force that sent me stumbling backward. Standing before me was a man, his face obscured by a thick layer of frost, his eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. He wore a heavy coat, damp from the storm, and his breath formed icy clouds in the frigid air. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out, backing away from the doorway. The man didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulling out a tattered photograph. It was a picture of a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children, smiling beneath the same overhead lights that now flickered ominously above me. My heart sank as recognition dawned on me. This was the photo my sister had lost years ago during a similar storm, her family missing without a trace. "Please," the man whispered, his voice hollow and desperate. "Help us." Before I could react, the room began to distort, the walls bending and warping as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. The temperature plummeted, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through the building, mingling with the howling wind. Shadows danced menacingly across the walls, and the man's figure began to fade, his form becoming translucent and ethereal. Desperation clawed at my mind as visions of my sister and her family flashed before my eyes. Trapped in an endless blizzard, their cries for help swallowed by the storm. The realization hit me like a freight train. These were the spirits of those who had vanished on Dead Man's Curve, forever bound to the rest area by a curse that prevented them from finding peace. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached out, my hand passing through the man's fading form. "I'll help you," I vowed, my voice steady despite the fear gripping my heart. "Tell me what I need to do." The room began to stabilize, the oppressive cold lifting as the spirits found a semblance of calm. The man's face became visible, revealing a sorrowful expression that mirrored the pain in his eyes. "Find the truth," he urged. "Expose the darkness that binds us." With that, the man vanished completely, leaving me alone in the now silent and still rest area. The storm had subsided, the first light of dawn creeping through the broken windows. Shaken but determined, I packed up my truck and set out to uncover the mystery behind the missing families of Dead Man's Curve. Days turned into weeks as I delved into old records and spoke with locals, piecing together the tragic history of the rest area. Years ago, during a series of brutal storms. Several families had gone missing without a trace, their disappearances never fully explained. Whispers of a malevolent presence lurking in the snowstorm had spread, but no evidence had ever surfaced to confirm the rumors. Armed with the knowledge that something supernatural was at play, I returned to Dead Man's Curve, this time with the intention of breaking the curse that held the spirits captive. I set up my equipment, documenting the rest area and performing rituals suggested by ancient Wampanoag traditions that aimed to honor and release restless souls. As night fell once more, the atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation. The sky darkened, and the wind began to howl, echoing the cries of the trapped spirits. I performed the rituals with reverence, my voice joining the spectral whispers that filled the air. Slowly, the tension in the room lifted, and the oppressive cold began to melt away. The spirits began to manifest, not as tormented figures but as peaceful entities ready to move on. The man from before stood before me once more, a grateful smile replacing his sorrowful gaze. "Thank you," he whispered, his form glowing with a soft, radiant light. "You've set us free." With those final words, the spirits dispersed, their presence leaving behind a serene stillness that felt like a weight lifted from the land. The rest area no longer felt haunted but rather honored, a place where the memories of those lost were finally acknowledged and respected. Driving away from Dead Man's Curve, the sun rising over the snow-covered landscape, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. The mystery had been unraveled, the curse broken, and the spirits at rest. But the experience left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder that some roads lead to places where the unseen and the forgotten linger, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover their truth. Years later, I still think back to that winter night, the eerie silence broken by desperate whispers and the haunting presence of the faceless man. Dead Man's Curve remains a place of legend, its story a testament to the enduring power of truth and compassion in the face of the supernatural. And sometimes, when a blizzard sweeps through Alaska, I catch a faint whisper on the wind, a gentle echo of gratitude from spirits finally at peace, reminding me that every mystery has a resolution, no matter how dark or terrifying the journey may be. Story number 6. Shadows over the Alpine Peaks. I've always been fascinated by the unknown, the mysteries that lie hidden in the most remote corners of our world. The Alps, with their towering peaks and endless snow, have always held a particular allure for me. It was December 1987 when my friends and I decided to embark on what we thought would be the adventure of a lifetime, a challenging ascent up one of the lesser-known peaks in the Alps, far removed from the bustling ski resorts and well-trodden trails. Our group consisted of 5 avid mountaineers: Mark, the unofficial leader with an infectious enthusiasm; Lisa, the meticulous planner and navigator; Tom, the jokester who kept our spirits high; Emma, the quiet observer with a keen eye for detail; and me, James, always the storyteller, eager to document our journey. We had spent months preparing, gathering supplies, studying maps, and honing our climbing skills. Nothing could dampen our excitement as we set out, the crisp winter air invigorating our senses. The first few days were exhilarating. We traversed through dense forests blanketed in snow, crossed icy rivers, and camped under clear, star-studded skies. The camaraderie among us was strong, each of us contributing our strengths to overcome the challenges of the ascent. But as we ventured higher, the weather began to change. The once gentle snowfall transformed into relentless blizzards, the winds howling through the narrow valleys like ancient spirits seeking vengeance. On the 4th day, as we approached a particularly treacherous section of the mountain, the true horror began. It was late afternoon when Mark noticed the first set of footprints, giant impressions in the fresh snow that none of us had made. They were unlike anything we had seen before, each step measuring at least 2 feet in length and spaced unnaturally apart. At first, we dismissed them as the remnants of a bear or some other large animal, but a deep sense of unease settled over us. "Guys, look at these," Mark called out, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. They're fresh. Lisa examined the footprints closely, her brow furrowing in confusion. They're too big for a bear. And the shape, it's almost humanoid. Tom chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe we've stumbled upon some kind of yeti, you know, the legendary abominable snowman. Emma shivered, not from the cold but from the creeping dread that had begun to take root. Let's just keep moving. It's probably nothing. But as we continued our ascent, the footprints multiplied. Each new set was identical, massive, deep, and distinctly humanoid. The realization that something was following us began to dawn on us, and fear replaced our earlier excitement. That night, as we huddled around our campfire, the wind howling outside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. We need to talk about this, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. These footprints are too consistent to be a coincidence. Mark nodded solemnly. I agree. Whatever is out there is tracking us. As if on cue, the howling wind seemed to morph into a series of guttural growls, resonating through the mountains. The fire flickered violently, casting eerie shadows that danced among the trees. Emma clutched her sleeping bag tighter, her eyes darting nervously around the camp. Did you guys hear that? She asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a deafening roar echoed through the valley, shaking the ground beneath us. The creature had found us. Panic surged through our veins as we scrambled to our feet, grabbing our gear and preparing to defend ourselves. But no weapon could fend off what we were facing. The beast emerged from the darkness, a hulking figure covered in thick, matted fur, standing at least 2 meters tall. Its eyes glowed a menacing red, piercing through the snowstorm with an intensity that sent shivers down our spines. Mark stepped forward, trying to maintain control. Stay calm, everyone. We need to back away slowly. But it was too late. The creature let out another roar, this one filled with raw fury, and lunged towards us with terrifying speed. We scattered in different directions, the blinding snowstorm making it difficult to track its movements. In the chaos, I heard Emma's scream, distant and desperate, as she vanished into the storm, her voice swallowed by the howling wind. Emma! I shouted, but my voice was lost in the storm. Mark and Tom were nowhere to be seen, and Lisa was huddled behind a large boulder, shaking uncontrollably. The storm raged on, the creature relentlessly searching for us. Hours felt like an eternity as we waited, hoping against hope that it would lose interest and move on. But the footprints continued to appear, a grim reminder that we were not alone. As dawn broke, the storm began to abate, the winds dying down and the snow settling into a heavy blanket of white. Exhausted and traumatized, we regrouped, the weight of the night's events pressing down on us. Emma was missing, and the fear of what had happened gnawed at our sanity. Determined to find her, we retraced our steps, following the trail of footprints that led deeper into the mountains. The search was frantic and fruitless, each passing hour filled with desperation and fear. It wasn't until midday that we found her. Her body was gone, but her backpack lay abandoned beside a set of strange, unnatural footprints. There was no sign of struggle, no clue as to what had taken her. We need to get out of here, Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. This place is cursed. But the mountains were unforgiving, and our supplies were running low. We pressed on, each step heavier than the last, haunted by the memory of Emma's disappearance and the creature that lurked in the shadows. The journey back was a blur of snow, exhaustion, and mounting dread. We navigated through treacherous terrain, the mountains seeming to conspire against us, each turn more perilous than the last. The footprints had stopped appearing, but the fear remained, a constant companion that refused to let go. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached the base camp, the site of the familiar tents and the promise of safety a beacon of hope. But our ordeal was far from over. As we packed up our gear, a final set of footprints appeared, leading straight towards us. "We need to leave," Mark said, his voice hollow. "Now." We abandoned our gear and ran, the snowstorm picking up once more, as if urging us to flee. The creature was still out there, waiting, and we knew it wasn't done with us yet. We made it back to the village just as the storm reached its peak, collapsing into the warmth of the local inn. Our bodies numb from the cold and our minds shattered by the night's horrors. The village was alive with whispers and sympathetic gazes, the locals offering what comfort they could to our broken spirits. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night haunted us all. Emma was never found, her disappearance a lingering shadow that refused to be lifted. The footprints remained a mystery, their origin and purpose beyond our understanding. Years later, the Alps still hold their secrets, the legends of the Yeti and the mysterious footprints continuing to captivate and terrify those who dare to venture into their icy embrace. I've tried to move on, to forget the horrors of December 1987, but the memories remain, a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown, and the darkness that lurks in the shadows of the alpine peaks. Sometimes, on the coldest winter nights, I catch a glimpse of red eyes in the distance, watching from the shadows, a silent testament to the night my friends and I faced the unimaginable. And I can't help but wonder if Emma is still out there, wandering the mountains, forever lost to the shadows of the Alps. Story number 7. Whispers in the Blizzard. I've always believed that isolation can warp the mind, especially when nature itself seems to conspire against you. But nothing could have prepared me for the winter of 1994, when a relentless blizzard trapped my family and me in our old farmhouse in rural Maine. What began as a simple snowstorm quickly spiraled into a nightmarish ordeal that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. It was mid-December, and the first snowflakes had begun to fall days earlier, transforming our modest farmhouse into a picturesque winter retreat. My wife, Sarah, and our 2 children, Emily and Jack, were eager to spend the holidays surrounded by the serene beauty of the countryside. Little did we know, the tranquility of our home was about to be shattered by forces beyond our understanding. On the evening of December 15th, the weather took a turn for the worse. What was forecasted as a minor snowstorm escalated into a full-blown blizzard, with winds howling like restless spirits and snow piling up rapidly against our windows and doors. The wind screamed through the cracks, rattling the old wood and making the house groan under the weight of the storm. As night fell, the power flickered and then died, plunging us into darkness. We lit candles and huddled around the fireplace, trying to stay warm as the storm raged outside. The first signs of something amiss were subtle, a sense of unease that settled over the house like a heavy blanket. But it wasn't until the clock struck midnight that the true horror began. It started with a soft, rhythmic knocking at the front door. At first, we dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on our ears. But the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent, echoing through the empty rooms. I approached the door cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. With each knock, my anxiety mounted. But every time I opened the door, there was no one there, only the swirling snow and the howling wind. "Sarah, did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "It's probably just the wind again. Let's not let it get to us." We returned to our seats by the fire, trying to ignore the unsettling sounds that seemed to penetrate every corner of our home. But the knocking didn't stop. Instead, it transformed into a cacophony of bangs and thuds, as if something or someone was desperately trying to get in. The children clung to us, their innocent eyes reflecting the terror we all felt. Emily whispered, "Daddy, I don't like this." Jack, usually so brave, trembled beside her. "Me neither. Maybe we should leave." But the storm had already sealed us in, and venturing out into the blinding snow was a risk we couldn't afford. We settled back into our uneasy vigil, the flames casting flickering shadows that danced menacingly on the walls. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, The knocking ceased. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the relentless wind and the distant rumble of thunder. We tried to calm our racing hearts, convincing ourselves that the ordeal was over. But deep down, we knew it wasn't. Around 2 a.m., the temperature inside the house plummeted, a biting cold that seemed to seep into our very souls. The candles flickered and then extinguished, leaving us in complete darkness. It was then that we began to hear it, a low, guttural whispering that seemed to come from all around us. Yet no one was there. "Leave, leave now." The voice was both terrifying and sorrowful, filled with an anguish that resonated deep within us. We huddled together, trying to find comfort in each other's presence. But the whispers grew louder, more urgent. Suddenly, a shadow flitted across the window, moving with unnatural speed despite the raging storm outside. Jack pointed, his voice shaky. "Look, there's someone out there." I grabbed a flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness as I approached the window. My hands shook as I wiped away the condensation, revealing a dark figure standing just beyond the glass. It was tall, its form indistinct, blending seamlessly with the swirling snowstorm. But what sent chills down my spine was the absence of a face. No eyes, no mouth, nothing to convey emotion or intent. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking with fear. The figure remained silent, its presence oppressive and malevolent. I could feel its gaze penetrating through the glass, a silent plea or perhaps a warning. Without warning, the shadow began to move, gliding effortlessly across the windowpane as if it were made of mist and shadow. I stumbled back, my mind racing to comprehend what I was witnessing. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread. The whispers returned, louder and more frantic, filling the space with their eerie chant. "Leave, leave now." Sarah grabbed my arm, pulling me away from the window. "We need to leave," she insisted, her voice trembling. "This house isn't safe." But the storm outside raged on, the wind howling with a fury that matched the terror inside our hearts. We knew that venturing out into the blinding snow was too dangerous, but staying meant facing the unknown horrors that haunted our home. As dawn approached, the storm began to abate, the winds dying down and the snow settling into a heavy, suffocating silence. Exhausted and broken, we decided to endure until the morning light, hoping that the horrors of the night would remain just that, nightmares that would fade with the dawn. But peace was short-lived. Just as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the darkness, the door burst open with a violent force, sending a gust of icy wind into the room. The shadowy figure reappeared, now standing directly in front of us, his presence more terrifying than ever. "This isn't over," it intoned, the voice now a deep, resonant growl that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of our home. I backed away, my mind numb with fear. "What do you want from us?" The figure began to move towards us, each step deliberate and slow, the air around it crackling with an unseen energy. We stood frozen, unable to move as it drew nearer, its faceless visage a constant reminder of the malevolent force that had invaded our lives. Just as it reached out a hand to touch me, a blinding light filled the room, and the figure dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind a sense of overwhelming relief and residual fear. The temperature normalized, the oppressive cold lifting as if a heavy burden had been removed. We sat there in stunned silence, the horrors of the night etched into our minds forever. The storm had passed, but the memory of the faceless man and the relentless whispers remained, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. In the days that followed, we sought solace in each other, trying to rebuild the shattered sense of security that had been stolen from us. The farmhouse, once a place of warmth and love, now felt tainted by the malevolent presence that had plagued us. We never fully understood what had happened that night. But one thing was clear, we had encountered something beyond our comprehension, a darkness that still lingered in the shadows of the old farmhouse. Years later, I still wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by the memories of that December storm. The whispers and the shadowy figure are ingrained in my mind, a constant reminder that some horrors are best left undisturbed. And as I watch my own children play in the snow, I can't help but wonder if the spirits of the past are still watching, waiting for their chance to reclaim what was once theirs.